Chapter 1. The Denial That Framed the Question. In 2019, a high-profile Commerce Department action effectively blocked certain U.S. components and software to a major foreign telecom vendor, and that single public denial crystallized how export rules shape real markets. The concrete thrust was simple. A license denial can stop a product line long before a diplomat or soldier sees it. The scene sets our thesis. Export controls are not abstract rules on paper, but operational choke points tied to specific regulations, ITAR 22 CFR, ER 15 CFR, and statutes like the Arms Export Control Act that decide who gets advanced military-capable technology. Chapter 2. What ITAR actually is. The International Traffic in Arms Regulations, run by the Department of State's Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, controls defense articles and defense services listed on the U.S. Munitions List, USML. Its role is licensing permanent exports of weapons, technical data, and assistance under the Arms Export Control Act. Violations can trigger criminal penalties and revocations. Why it matters. If an item is on the USML, the bar for approval is higher and interagency review is stricter. An emblematic case is a denied missile component sale where ITAR classification forced a license and a diplomatic review, showing the path from item to policy decision. Chapter 3. What the ER actually is. The Export Administration Regulations, administered by the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, govern dual-use items and many commercial technologies via Export Control Classification Numbers, ECCNs. ER hits items with potential military or proliferation utility without being outright weapons. Why it matters? ER covers the silicon, software, and sensors that often power defense systems, and license policy can be tuned by destination, end use, or end user. Public BIS entity list actions and license denials against specific firms illustrate how ER measures can act as blunt or surgical trade controls. Chapter 4. Where the split happens. ITAR versus ER. The practical split often depends on whether an item is a design intent weapon system or a commercial product with dual-use potential, designated by the USML or otherwise classified under an ECCN, sometimes after a commodity jurisdiction (CJ) ruling. The jurisdiction decision changes the player set, state versus commerce, the review process, and likely outcome. A common microstory. A company submits a CJ request. The State Department reclassifies its product as a defense article, and the commerce route becomes a state review. What was once a predictable export path turns into an interagency diplomatic question. Chapter 5. Control triggers, specs, end use, destination, person. Export controls don't only follow the object, they follow use and people. High-precision guidance, encryption performance, or certain range and lethality specs can flip controls. Likewise, known end users in embargoed destinations or entities on the entity list or specially designated nationals list change the calculus. Deemed exports, transfers of controlled technical knowledge to foreign nationals inside the U.S. are another trigger. The takeaway? Even if hardware sits on a dock, the paperwork and people often determine the outcome more than the part number. Chapter 6. Section 123 and Nuclear Cooperation. Section 123 of the Atomic Energy Act creates bilateral nuclear cooperation agreements that condition transfers of nuclear materials, technology, and know-how. The Department of State and the Department of Energy take lead roles. These 123 agreements set unusually strict standards for safeguards, peaceful use, and retransfer, and they can constrict reactor and enrichment exports far more tightly than standard ER-ITAR lanes. A micro-example. A proposed reactor component shipment stalled until a cooperating 123 agreement clause satisfied safeguards reviewers, showing how treaty-style instruments overlay routine export rules. Chapter 7. License types, exceptions, and timing. Licenses come in flavors: authorizations for permanent exports, temporary exports, re-exports, and retransfer. But there are also built-in exceptions and license exceptions under ERR and limited exemptions under ITAR. Timing matters. Some approvals run weeks, some need months of interagency coordination and an affirmative national security waiver. Practically, exporters choose between applying for a tailored license, relying on a license exception, or redesigning a product to fall below control thresholds. The operational rule is timing and strategy can be the deciding export control. Chapter 8. The Interagency Review and Who Weighs In. Many license decisions route through interagency bodies: states' DDTC, Commerce's BIS, Department of Defense reviewers, the intelligence community, and sometimes Treasury's OFAC for sanctions. The Defense Technology Security Administration and DoD offices provide technical and policy inputs. Law enforcement or trade partners may flag concerns. The simple takeaway: a denial often reflects a consensus among technical, legal, and policy voices, not a single desk decision. That consensus path is why high-tech dual-use transfers touch diplomatic and industrial policy simultaneously. Chapter 9. Compliance Tools, Classification, CJ Requests, and Mitigations. Companies use compliance tools, commodity jurisdiction requests, internal classification, technical redesign, and end-use controls to tilt outcomes. A CJ ruling can move a product into the ITAR or keep it under ER. Redesign can remove a spec that triggers control. Legally binding end-user assurances and end-use checks can unlock licenses. The microstory: a firm avoided a hard license by changing encryption default settings and adding audited logging, trading performance for an exportable configuration. The practical line: controls are negotiable in design and paperwork, not just a binary yes/no. Chapter 10. Enforcement, Penalties, and Real Consequences. Enforcement ranges from administrative fines and denial orders to criminal prosecution and cargo seizure. BIS and DDTC publish denials and enforcement actions publicly, and courts have upheld severe penalties under the Arms Export Control Act and AECA-related statutes. OFAC adds a sanctions overlay that can independently bar transactions. The consequence is market exclusion and reputational damage. Public enforcement actions have bankrupted firms or stopped product lines. The lesson? Compliance failures carry strategic, legal, and financial risk, so exporters often treat controls as business risk management. Chapter 11. Limits, Workarounds, and the Mythbuster. A common myth is that export controls are an absolute barrier. The reality is more nuanced. Controls can slow or reshape technology flows, but they can be evaded through foreign sourcing, gray market intermediaries, or indigenous substitution. On the other hand, controls do reshape development paths and investment decisions, and they frequently divert sensitive production to trusted partners. The counterexample matters. Where controls block one route, policy and industry incentives can create alternative supply chains, so controls are part of a broader toolset, not a standalone fix. Chapter 12. Decision Tree for Exporters and Final Takeaway. If you export, the rule of thumb is 3 quick checkpoints. What is it? USML, ECCN, CJ, who is the end user, entity list sanctioned destination, and what is the end use? Military, proliferation sensitive, or civil? Begin with the classification. Consult state or commerce early, design mitigations where possible, and prepare for interagency timelines. In short, control equals item plus person plus use. That framing turns a tangled legal regime into a practical exporter decision tree. If this unpacking helped, the next useful video would map every U.S. export control agency and the forms they sign. Tell us which agency you want us to break down next.